Today we are joined by Julienne, who is from the STEM Action Center, and she is going to talk all about STEM. So hopefully there's some things that you guys are able to take away to implement in your programs and start thinking about for the next couple months of programming, whatever that looks like for you. All right, Julienne, take it away.
Fantastic. Thank you. Okay, so before we even get started, I would like for everyone to please do a favor for me. Take a second and see if you have a piece of paper and a pen or a pencil somewhere nearby. It can be whatever you want, like a sticky note or a journal or whatever. We are going to do a little bit of drawing today. So if you need a second to go grab something, do it now and then come right back while I'm kind of talking over a little bit about what we do and what to expect for today. So thank you so much for that introduction. I am from the Utah STEM Action Center. Our purpose is to really facilitate high quality STEM education in the state of Utah. So STEM stands for science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And as many of you know, there's a big push right now to be able to do a lot of STEM education, to do high quality STEM education. A lot of grants are dependent on it. There are a lot of skills that we're hoping to develop for our future workforce, whether students go into these professions or not. There's a lot of value in doing this kind of programming. So we are going to start with a question, a couple of questions. I am hoping to find out what you guys worry about it, but if you can, go ahead and pull up your phone and scan this code so that I can get a sense of how many people in this training right now are planning or facilitating STEM programming in their programs, and how many people either don't do it or don't do direct facilitation, things like that. So go ahead and take a couple of minutes to do that, and then depending on the results, we will sort of tailor this learning experience to the crowd that we have. I'm going to give everyone 3 minutes to do that. All right, we've got some results coming in. Take about 2 more minutes. Once it looks like we have everyone, we will close it. All right, go ahead and finish up if you haven't checked that out yet. Now is the time. It looks like overwhelmingly people already are facilitating or planning STEM programming, which is fantastic. And those who are not either don't facilitate activities or are overseeing staff who do. So we'll talk a little bit today about some tips and tricks you can use in your facilitation, some things that you can use to make it easier or perhaps more high quality for your grants, things like that. And one more question for you. Second verse, same as the first. Let's get a sense of what is difficult for you in your position. So go ahead and scan that in. Give me a sense of what things you may struggle with in your programs, and we'll try to speak directly to some of those challenges. And you can select more than one option in this. If all of these are difficult, then please, by all means, select all of them. All right, take about 1 more minute, look through those. If you need more time, you can unmute yourself and shout out so I know to slow down. Okay, so looking at these results, it looks like the top 2 things that people are dealing with right now is that your STEM programming is fine, but you want it to be higher quality and that you want more lessons and ideas for STEM activities. So that's what we'll focus in on today. Let's jump right into some STEM facilitation. So what I would like everyone to do, take 10 seconds and think about the way that you run your programs and your activities. Think about your lesson facilitation and your behavior management. And then I'm going to pull up a video and we're going to see how well you think that your current facilitation would cope with a activity like this. Let's see if it'll pull up. It was doing it just fine earlier, but of course now it's struggling. Okay, so let me just switch my screen right here. So this is a pretty simple STEM activity. It's only about 7 seconds long. So a very simple kind of pop rocket situation, but one of the things that I have often encountered, let me reshare this PowerPoint again, is that doing high quality STEM is more challenging than sometimes it feels like it should be. So one of the challenges with STEM facilitation is that it has different needs than other kinds of activities often do. It has different needs in terms of behavior management, in terms of the way that we give students freedoms to make decisions or not, how much creative liberty can be taken. If you're doing a chemistry experiment and you have a student who wants to mix two chemicals together without knowing what they do, that could be dangerous. So you can't necessarily always give students the same types of freedom in your STEM facilitation as you can in other lessons, and that can be really challenging and it can really affect the quality of your STEM programming. So one of the things that is the most important in STEM facilitation is the way that we give instructions, and this really affects quality of the STEM activities. One of the biggest things that we find when we go into classrooms, and that is part of what we do throughout the year, is we take STEM activities to classrooms and we do them with teachers, and the teachers can observe us and they can help with the activities and with the students, and we pay a lot of attention to the way that teachers are running their activities. So I want to go through some of the instructions that we hear most often when we are doing STEM activities. This is the number one, is be careful. And this is an instruction that is often really well meant, but that students don't really understand exactly what that means. One of the things that's easy to forget is that a third grader doesn't know what can happen if they don't hold the X-Acto knife correctly. Not that perhaps we should be giving X-Acto knives to third graders, but in some circumstances, students might be using tools that they don't really understand what's happening, things like that. So we have to be really, really specific with our instructions. Be careful is not as helpful to a student as the glue gun is hot. Make sure that you only touch the handle, things like that. So the other thing to keep in mind is that instructions need to be positive rather than negative. If you tell a student what not to do, that's the only thing that they're going to think of. A lot of people have heard the old adage of, if you say don't think of a purple elephant, then suddenly that's all you can think of. The same goes with instructions when you're trying to do STEM lessons. If you tell a student what not to do, even if their intentions are good, that's all they're going to think of. A way to rephrase this might be, ask the teacher if you need to use the hot glue gun. So telling students what they should do is going to give them the brain space that they need to focus in on your activities rather than trying to figure out what your instructions are. This is one we hear a lot, use level 3 voice. This is great because it is specific and it tells students what they should be doing. So that is a great instruction. This is one we use a lot when we're doing engineering activities. Draw your idea before you start to build it. Great, perfect. It's specific, it's positive, students know what to do with that. Share the scissors, right? That's another positive one. Sit down. Let's talk about this one for a second. Sit down is a clear, specific, positive instruction, but it's not one that students always understand why the instruction is there. And if you want students to be able to reach the quality of STEM that we're hoping in all of our programs to achieve, they have to understand the why of things, and they have to understand why you're asking them to do things and be able to make some decisions on their own. So there may be times that it's appropriate to say, I need everyone to sit down so that everyone can see the board. But if it's a matter of sit down because you're uncomfortable with the level of chaos, or because there's someone in the room and you're afraid that They're going to think that you're a bad facilitator, things like that. Those are real challenges that we face when we do the kind of chaos level STEM activities that we're trying to do. So really thinking through the why of your instructions and your facilitation is very important. If you can't explain to a student why you need it, then how do you expect them to be able to come up with explanations of other questions later on? Quiet down is a hard one. Something like use a level 3 voice is a lot more specific and it tells them exactly what they should be doing, whereas something like quiet down is a little bit vague. Again, things that are phrased in a negative, don't touch that. It's really hard for a student to remember what they should be doing instead. Try not to waste supplies is one that we hear all the time. Supplies are a huge component of STEM learning, and sometimes we get anxious about what we have and what we don't have. So it's a lot more helpful to say everyone gets 2 pieces of cardboard than it is to say don't do this or try not to use the supplies. Very briefly, we're just going to talk about facilitating for minority groups. I know a lot of programs that are through a lot of our local organizations really serve high needs groups. And there's a lot of research that shows that there are some problems in the way that we facilitate STEM. There are researchers, Myra and David Zacher and Karen R. Zittelman, have published decades of work on this. And here is the summary of what they found. Teachers in general spend up to 2/3 of their time talking to male students above female students. They're more likely to interrupt girls, but allow boys to talk over them. They acknowledge girls, but praise and encourage boys. They spend more time prompting boys to seek deeper answers while rewarding girls for being quiet. They more frequently call boys to the front for demonstration. And they direct their gaze to boys more often when asking questions, especially when the questions are open-ended. These are teachers that agreed to these studies. They're teachers that want to provide high quality training, that want to be sure that all of their students are succeeding. But these are the habits that our society has left us with, that every teacher and facilitator has to learn how to fight. And the first step of that is knowing what they are. So if you have the time, if you have staff that you work with, take a lesson or two and watch for these things and see what you can do to consciously do the opposite of them. In general, teachers who move to calling on boys versus girls 50-50 feel like they're calling on girls 3/4 or 100% of the time, when in reality that's not true at all. So just being aware of our perceptions of STEM facilitation is really important. And this doesn't just apply to the gender gap, it also applies to race, ethnicity, cognitive ability, all kinds of things. Black girls are 12 times more likely to be suspended than their white counterparts. And in 2 states in the past year, there was not a single girl or any boys of color who took the computer science AP exam. If you want to know more about that, you can pull up the advanced placement exams, and it breaks every state down by demographic of who took which test. There is a really concerning gap in STEM fields specifically, so that's something to always keep in mind with facilitation. Okay, if you have your video on, just give me a quick show of hands. Who has heard of growth mindset? Yes? Okay, so we're pretty familiar with this already. We're just going to breeze right through it. Study done by Carol Dweck, where she gave 2 groups of students a test. One group, she said, this is a really hard test, but you're going to do really well because you're very smart. And she told another group, this is a very hard test, but you're going to do well because you're going to work really hard on it. Not only did the second group outscore the first one, when she came back to those groups and said, hey, I have another test for you, it's even harder than the first one, the first group didn't want to try it, and the second group did. And one of the reasons for that is because the second group believed that even if they failed at it, or even if they weren't good at it, if they tried it, they would be more successful. The number one student behavior that I deal with in STEM facilitation is students saying, I can't do this, it's too hard, or I don't know what to do. When they do that, 9 times out of 10, the reason that they've done that is because they have a fixed mindset. Either they've decided that they're stupid and they can't do it, or they've decided that they're bad at math, or they've decided that they're bad at science, or they've decided that they're good at it and they're not willing to take a risk that they might be wrong. So modeling growth mindset is always important, and it's doubly important when you're doing STEM facilitation or when you're doing activities that deal with science and math. Studies show that by the third grade, students have decided whether or not they're good at math, and that decision has a higher impact on their academic success than gender, socioeconomic status, race, ethnicity, geography, anything. Whether or not they think they're good at math is the highest correlated statistic that we have to academic success. So modeling these behaviors for students, things like, it's okay if we don't understand it, but let's try. Or, you know what? I don't have enough practice to be able to do that. Why don't we practice it together? Those kinds of things really bring your growth mindset skills to STEM facilitation, because if you don't model it, if you tell students that you are not very good at math or that you're not very good at science, they will take that as permission to do the same thing. Okay, I hope everyone got their piece of paper, because we are going to do an activity. What I would like you to do is please draw a scientist. You can do a stick figure if you would like, but we're going to take 2 minutes and draw a scientist. You can also draw an engineer or a technician or a mathematician if you wanted. And when you're done, we're gonna hold them up and we're gonna share them and talk about them a little bit. So 2 minutes starting now. All right, take like 1 more minute, add your finishing touches. If you need more time, we can give you more time. That's okay. let's take maybe like 2 more minutes so that you can really feel good about your scientist. All right, it looks like we've got people kind of finishing up. Take like 30 more seconds. If you're not done, you can keep working on this afterwards, but we just kind of want to get the general idea. Okay. All right, now if you have your camera up, go ahead and see if you can hold it up and show us. If not, and you would like to participate, unmute yourself, because I'm going to ask you some questions. All right, we've got some great things going on. Okay, so how many of you drew a scientist with big frizzy hair? I see a couple hands. If you want to answer the question, you can unmute yourself and answer it, but like I see a lot of that. Okay, how many of your scientists had glasses and or a lab coat? Almost everybody. Okay, perfect. How many of you drew a scientist that was old? So, like an age that you consider old? A couple people. All right. A few people. How many people drew a scientist that was a race or ethnicity other than themselves? Almost nobody. That's fantastic. So when we do this activity with students, overwhelmingly, students draw Einstein. They draw an old white man in a lab coat with frizzy hair and glasses, because that's what our idea of what a scientist is. We see scientists as separate than us. We think of people who are building rockets, who are mixing chemicals in labs. We think of people who are solving impossible mathematical equations, or maybe we think of somebody who's sitting in front of a desk with like 4 computer monitors coding, right? We have a very specific idea of what science, technology, engineering, and math looks like. And what we don't realize is that those skills are actually a lot more broad-reaching than we think that they are. So to give you an idea, here are the Utah core standards of what makes someone a good scientist, engineer, or mathematician. Okay? Take a look at these. We'll talk about them specifically, but what you'll notice in these STEM practices is that none of these are content related. Okay? We do have content that has to be taught to students in the Utah Core Standards, right? There are things that students have to know. They're going to get tested on them. But both sets of core standards have these STEM practices. And these things can be a lot more accessible than some of the content. If someone asked me to teach 11th grade trigonometry, I wouldn't feel qualified to do that. I don't know trigonometry. It's been way too long since I studied that. I don't have the practice. But what I do have is the ability to make sense of problems and persevere in solving them, right? So if somebody said, hey, you know, I've got a student who's really struggling in trig. I may not be able to help them with that content area, but what I can do is teach them how to break a problem down into steps that they know how to work with and how to help them build their skill to be able to persevere in solving it, right? So the new Utah Seed Standards combine science and engineering. Not every school has adopted these, but they will all by the year 2021. And they have these engineering practices. Ask a question or define a problem. Is that something that you guys know how to do? You know how to ask a question, be like, I wonder why that happens that way, or man, and this is really not working for me, right? You know how to do that. That's okay, great. Developing and using models. This one seems tricky, but it's actually very simple. If a student draws a picture of the water cycle, that's a model. If you're playing a game and you tell students, okay, move the way a cat moves, they're using a model. They're using their bodies to model a scientific concept, right? So modeling just means they can take a concept and use some other way to explain it, right? So if they draw a picture of a caterpillar, that's a model, things like that. Planning and carrying out investigations. This is a fun one. This is my favorite one. If you have a question and then you try to find the answer to that question, you've planned and carried out an investigation, right? There are some specific scientific skills with that, right? We talk about controls and variables and how to get really accurate information, but being in this habit of having a question and trying to figure it out, that's a STEM practice. We don't always think of it that way, but it's one of the core practices for science and engineering. Analyzing, interpreting data. This one used to scare me a lot because I don't love graphs and I don't love plot points. And then one of the things that I finally learned was that data comes in a lot of forms. One of the things that kindergarten students have to learn is to predict weather patterns. So all you have to do for analyzing and interpreting data is ask a student to say, hey, when does it get dark outside? And if they can say, you know, it gets dark outside every night, right? They've looked at a set of data, which is, hey, every single night it gets dark out. And then they're going to start analyzing it because that's what kids do. They're going to go, wait, why does it get dark out every night? Oh, it's because the sun goes down, right? That's a very, very simple concept, but that skill applies all the way up through AP biology, right? You're taking a look at the information you have and saying, hey, you know what, there's a pattern here, and it's a pretty simple pattern, or maybe it's a very complex one, right? So that's a skill that is a STEM skill. Using mathematics and computational thinking, we'll talk about in a second because that's math practices. Constructing explanations and designing solutions. Has anyone here ever done an activity where you like make a solar oven, or you try to insulate something, or you like give kids a challenge and then they have to like build something to solve the challenge? I'm seeing a lot of head nods, right? That's constructing an explanation and designing a solution. Done. It doesn't have to be a STEM content challenge. You can say, hey, you know, everyone really wants to paint today, but we don't have any paints. What else could we do instead? And if they're going around being like, well, you know, maybe we could use this instead, or maybe we could go outside and use sidewalk chalk, right? That's constructing that's designing a solution. Okay, so that is a STEM skill, even though it's not STEM content. Engaging in argument from evidence. My favorite way to do this is to ask the question, what makes you say that? Kids come up with some of the craziest theories, right? I had a girl come up to me once and she said, you know what, I think caterpillars are fake. And I was like, oh, okay. Didn't quite know how to answer that. So what I said was, what makes you say that? And she said, well, I've never seen a caterpillar before. Right? She had a piece of evidence, and her piece of evidence was, I've never seen a caterpillar, right? And she made an argument from it. So then I said, okay, well, what if we could find a caterpillar? We were not successful, by the way. We had to go look up some pictures of caterpillars. But with the pictures and with the promise that I had, in fact, in my life seen a caterpillar, when she had new evidence, she was able to come up with a new argument, which is, oh, maybe caterpillars are just really hard to find, right? So she took a piece of evidence and then she made an argument from it. That's a STEM practice, right? It's a really simple, easy way to really drill those skills in a way that students don't notice and that they're not intimidated by. And then the last science and engineering practice is obtaining, evaluating, and communicating information. So if a student can look for a piece of information, if they can tell you what they found, if they can look at a piece of information and say, you know what, I think that's true, or I think that's probably not true, that's a STEM skill. Math is perhaps the scariest part of STEM. A huge, overwhelming percentage of educators feel intimidated by math. They feel like they didn't learn how to do it very well, that they're not very good at it. I have felt that way for most of my life. Like, you know what, I'm just not good at it. Like, I just don't like it. And then one of the things that I learned was, oh, maybe I just, that's not my favorite subject, but maybe I just haven't really practiced it that much. When I look at these practices, I can do all of these things, right? We talked about making sense of problems and persevere in solving them. I can reason abstractly and quantitatively. I can look at two objects and tell you which one is bigger. I can look at two groups of kids and say, this one is more and that one is less, right? Reasoning abstractly and quantitatively doesn't have to be complicated. It's just taking ideas and breaking them down into their patterns and saying, what does more mean? What does further mean? What does smaller or less or longer? What do all of those things mean and how do they apply in your life? Constructing arguments and critiquing the reasoning of others, right? Students do this all the time, whether you want them to or not, right? They're always going to be constructing arguments and critiquing others. But if you can teach them how to do it in a way that is evidence-based, that is based on the things that they can observe and do, that is a mathematical practice, right? Modeling with mathematics. If you've got a kid who's building something with, Lincoln Logs, right? I wish we had Lincoln Logs in the after school program, but if they're doing that and you say, hey, can you build me a house that has 4 sides? That's math, right? It's geometry, and they're modeling their understanding of geometry by building a house with 4 sides, right? These things don't have to have their own activities. You can integrate them into the activities that you're already doing. Using appropriate tools strategically, right? So once students learn how to add and they're saying, I would like another serving of cornbread, please. If you say, okay, you've had 1 and you're going to have 1 more, what do you need to do to figure out how many you're going to have? If they can think, oh, that's adding, they've done that thing. Attend to precision. This is one that is easy to understand and hard to teach. I'm sure that nobody in their life has ever had a student who is sloppy with their work. I'm sure that I'm the only one who's ever had that experience, right? But teaching students how to attend to precision and not just that they have to is really important. Teaching them to say, hey, you know what? When I do homework, I do it really fast and then I make a lot of mistakes. So one of the things that I do is I go back and I check my work again. Or one of the things that I do is I set a timer, and instead of doing a problem in 30 seconds, I try to make sure I spend 2 minutes on every problem, right? Any tools or strategies that you already have that help you with that are also going to help your students with that. Looking for and making use of structure, right? It's pretty self-explanatory. They're trying to find patterns. And the same with the next one. Express regularity and repeated reasoning. What things are consistently the same? What things change all the time, right? Those are skills that you need in order to be able to solve a geometry problem, but they're skills that you can practice in your real world. If you have a program and at 3:15 every day they sign in and at 3:30 they have a snack, that's a pattern. And if they can identify that and say, oh, hey, I know what a pattern looks like, then they're practicing a math skill without ever really realizing it. Okay, so we are going to do another activity. This one is also hands-on. I would like you to write down a 1-sentence description of your favorite go-to activity, right? You've been called in to substitute at a program. It's not your program, not your kids. You don't know how they work. You have 30 minutes before parents come to pick them up. What do you do? Like, what is your back pocket activity that you're like, this is tried and true. It always works. you know, it's going to keep them from killing each other until I can hand them off to the adults responsible for them. Okay. For me, this is paper airplanes. I'm like, if I can find a stack of paper, I can get kids to make paper airplanes. It's my favorite thing. It's very easy. That's my go-to activity. It could be anything you want. So take a minute, write it down. If you feel like sharing, you can unmute yourself and tell us what your favorite go-to activity is, or you can just write it down. Okay, everybody have their activity? I'm looking for some nodding. I have a couple of nods. Yeah, okay. Now I'm gonna go back to this screen, and I want you to think of your activity, and we're gonna take a little bit longer on this one. I'm gonna give you like 5 minutes. What of these practices can you integrate into that activity? Okay, it could be an art activity. It could be, you know, a sport or a game, right? Whatever it is, try to pick one of these practices and think about what it looks like if you add one of these practices. Okay, 5 minutes, you can write it down, you can throw it in the chat, right? How does it change that activity? Ooh, silent ball is a good one. I love that one. Lego building, obstacle courses, puzzles, one fish, two fish, roller coasters. Yeah. Yeah, these are all fantastic ones. Okay. When I do paper airplanes and I need it to be a high quality STEM activity, one of the things that I ask the students is, how do you make a paper airplane go the farthest? And then we plan and carry out an investigation, right? So we ask the question, then I say, okay, well, how do you think you can find that out? And sometimes, if they don't have a lot of STEM skills yet, they say something like, well, I'm just going to throw the same paper airplane over and over really hard. Right? That's one way to do an investigation. And then when that doesn't give them the results that they want, you can say, okay, well, let's try a couple of different types of paper airplane, right? And suddenly now they are planning and carrying out an investigation, and they think that they're playing with paper airplanes, right? Okay. Yeah, so if you use silent ball to make patterns, absolutely, right? That is both a science and an engineering practice.
Can you tell us what, well, for those of us that are ignorant to us, tell us what silent ball is, please.
Okay, I can just jump in if Aaron doesn't want to answer that one. Silent ball is the students are in their classroom or wherever they're at, and they have a ball and they have to pass it back and forth without dropping it and without making any sound. So it's a great one if you have like some noise restrictions, things like that, and they get very into it, right? They like are like trying to look at each other and like communicate silently who's gonna get the ball next, right? So it's a really engaging one. All right, yeah. So if you take a science activity, something that's already science content, and you add questions, that's a big one. We're actually going to talk about that a little bit more in a minute, so hang on to that thought. Yes, I should have known that Eleanor would would have a Gaga ball idea. Yeah, so asking questions like, what if it was shaped differently, right? They're asking a question. They're gathering information. How do we keep the tables from sliding? Yeah, all of those are fantastic ideas, right? So if you have an activity that you already use, you can make it a STEM activity. You can raise the quality of the STEM activity. One of the things that is really great if you do have grants that you have to report STEM activities is if you can say that you did one of these things in your activity, congratulations, you can report to 21st Century, hey, we did this art activity and it also met this Utah math core standard. Right? One of the things that I've learned is if you can write down a core standard, they're not going to question that one. So if you want the links to those, I put them in the PowerPoint here. I'm sure that there's a way to make this available to everyone, or you can just Google Utah core standards and it'll pull them right up. And then it'll give you like a little blurb that says, you know, Utah core math standard K.M.1. Make sense of problems and persevere in solving them, right? You can just copy paste that right into your grant reporting, and congratulations, you've proved that you have done some STEM. Okay, we've got some time left, so let's talk about high quality STEM. So one of the biggest differentiations of high quality STEM is student engagement and student project learning. So how much power the students have to be able to make decisions is how high of quality the STEM lesson tends to be. There is inquiry learning specifically is a pedagogical method. It was developed by Marshall Heron in 1971, and recently it has also picked up some traction in schools. Heather Banshee and Randy Bell in 2008 published an article that breaks inquiry learning down into 4 levels. So these are the 4 levels. The first level is an activity where you provide a question, a procedure, and a solution. So if you need to prove to students that if you put vinegar and baking soda together, it creates a chemical reaction, you say, hey, okay, here's the question. What happens if I put vinegar and baking soda together? You have in front of you some vinegar, you have in front of you some baking soda, pour them into each other and see what happens. It does this thing, okay? That is a level 1 inquiry activity, which is not to say that it's not a good activity. If you really need a demonstration or something hands-on in order to drill a concept, level 1 inquiry is a really, really great way to do it. If you have something that has safety concerns, level 1 inquiry, absolutely. One of the reasons that we think of chemistry experiments when we think of this type of problem is that you have to provide some of these things in order to do chemistry experiments safely. Level 2 is called structured inquiry. And in a structured inquiry, you provide a question or a problem or a challenge. You tell them how they're going to solve it, and then you let them come to the solution on their own. So with this example, you would say, okay, what do you think is going to happen if I mix together vinegar and baking soda? Okay, you're going to mix them together, and then you're going to tell me what you discover. So they do it, and they say, oh, wow, it fizzes up, and it's a chemical reaction. I think, it does this or it does that. Okay, that's a level 2 inquiry. Level 3 is called guided inquiry, and in a level 3, you only provide the question or the challenge. This is the highest level of inquiry that most programs and most classrooms can reach on a regular basis because you have to provide something, typically, right? So if you're telling students, okay, what do you think is going to happen if I mix these different things together? And that's all you're giving them, then they're coming up with the procedure and they're coming up with the solution. Those kinds of activities drive student engagement at a higher rate than level 1 or level 2 inquiry does. Level 4 is called open inquiry, and this one is tricky but also very, very rewarding for students. This is where you let them decide what problem, challenge, or question they have, how they want to solve it, and then come to a solution on their own. This is, I think, harder to do with STEM than it is to do with other topics. For instance, when we did service learning, we did a lot of open inquiry because we would sit down with students and say, okay, we've got some time set aside to do some service activities. What do you guys want to do? What needs do you see? And then they're coming up with solutions. The last time I did a really open inquiry project, I sat down with a group of Girl Scouts and I said, okay, we're going to do a service activity. What needs do you see in the community? And the girls talked about a lot of different things, and one of the things that they decided was that they are really sad and disappointed that kids who are in homeless shelters don't get to have birthday parties. That was the challenge that they identified that they wanted to solve. And so then I said, okay, you've identified, the problem. Now, how are you going to figure out what to do about it? So we sat down and they decided that they needed to do some research. They needed to talk to the people who were in the homeless shelter, and they needed to figure out what the solution was. So they came up with the procedure, then they came up with the solution. This is an example of an open inquiry question. Yeah, something like a science fair is a perfect example of this. If you're telling students, okay, what do you want to investigate, right? That's open inquiry. So in your day-to-day activities, guided inquiry is probably a much easier bar to try to hit than an open inquiry, because open inquiry projects usually require a certain amount of sustained energy throughout time. If you're doing a week-long summer camp, you may be able to do an open inquiry project. If you're doing an after-school program where you see different students every day and it's a revolving door, guided or structured inquiry may be a more appropriate use of your time. It's also important to realize that it doesn't have to be these specific combinations. So level 2 structured inquiry could also be something where you provide the question and the solution, but not the procedure. Level 3 guided inquiry could be you provide the procedure, say okay, I'm going to teach you how to use a microscope, right? It's important to me that you learn how to use this tool correctly. Then they come up with the question and the solution on their own. That's also a level 3 guided inquiry. So this is kind of the easiest way to do it, but you can mix and match what pieces of information you want to give students. And it's really, it makes it much easier to approach doing student-led activities than trying to come up with something out of the blue. So we're going to do one more activity. Oh boy, we're running short on time. One more activity. What I'd like you to do is take a STEM activity that you have already done, something you facilitated in the past, and look for a piece of information that you could remove safely to make it a higher inquiry level activity. So if you already have a level 4 inquiry activity, set it aside, don't use it for this. Pick something that's level 1, 2, or 3 and see if there's a piece of that information, if there's a step of that activity that you could remove to make it a higher inquiry activity. So let's take, we're running real short on time. So let's take like 3 minutes for this one. You can throw them up in the chat. You can, you know, take notes, whatever floats your boat. Let's see. Like a time to fill it. Yeah. If you're gonna do slime, take away the recipe, provide them ingredients, and say, okay, how are you gonna make it now? That's a great one. Kids love slime. They love it. All right, take like 1 more minute. If you don't have anything right now, that's okay. Like I said, I'll make this available and you can always do it on your own time later. If you would like to. I'm not gonna make you. Okay, so earlier somebody said something about asking questions, and that is another very easy way to take your STEM facilitation from an excellent level to a really outstanding level. So the best kinds of questions you can ask in STEM are open-ended, okay? So I hope everyone's got their group chat pulled up, because we're going to do some yeses and nos. I'm going to throw up a question, and I would like you to put a yes or a no in the chat whether you think it is an open-ended productive question for a STEM activity. All right, here we go. Maybe. No, go this way. Okay, how tall are you going to build that? Open-ended, yes or no? Throw it. You could also give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down. I'm getting a lot of no's. Yeah, that's a closed question, right? It's not a yes or no question, but if the student can answer it with the word this tall, then like not an open-ended question, right? There could still be a use for it, but perhaps not as helpful. Are you having fun? Thumbs up, thumbs down, yes, no. No, right? Like you might want to know that piece of information, but that is not an open-ended question that is going to increase the quality of your STEM facilitation. What's your plan? Yeah, okay. That is an open-ended question, right? You're asking the student to think about and explain to you what their decision-making process was or is going to be in whatever activity you're doing. Okay, what made you think of doing it that way? Yeah, right, that's open-ended. There could be a lot of different answers to that. And again, they're having to engage their brain in a way that they weren't before you asked the question. Talk to me about what's confusing you. I think this one's not technically a question. But yeah, it's still open-ended, right? You're still driving that really high inquiry process because you're asking them to engage and explain something to you. Do you think that's going to work? Okay, what if you followed up with, do you think that's going to work? No. Why not? Does that fix your problem? Right? I do this all the time. I get halfway through a question and I go, oh, that's a useless question. And then I just tack the word why onto the end. And you would be shocked how often students will buy that, right? So I get halfway through a question and I'm like, do you think that's a great idea? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, what makes you say that, right? Why? Why did you come to that conclusion? And that can really like help shift the gears if you're used to asking more closed-ended questions to something more open-ended. It's going to work. What are you building that out of? What do you think? Nope, not really. Like there's just an answer, right? If you say, what are you building that out of? Do you think that's going to work? Why or why not? Right? Suddenly now you've created a whole investigation. Suddenly now you've created a whole mini STEM lesson within your wider lesson. And it's about, you know, tension and building strength of materials and can they identify patterns, things like that. Okay, what's your favorite part of your experiment? This one's my favorite one. Obviously, this is an open-ended question. They have to tell you. They have to think about it. You are absolutely correct. I can't spell. It's fine. We're going to move on. Did you get the result you expected? Again, just add why or why not to the end of it, right? Did you get what you expected? No. Okay, why do you think that happened? Okay, I even put that on there. Okay, what would you try next? This is another one of my favorites. I can't tell you how many science experiments I've done that have gone wrong, right? You test it out at home, it works perfectly, you bring it in, and for some reason, it just doesn't work when you do it in the program. It happens all the time. The more high-level concepts you try to do, the more this is going to happen. One of the things I really recommend is getting in the habit of asking students, what would you try next if you had the time, right? Hey, we are out of time, okay? We are not going to have time to make this work today. What do you want to try tomorrow to make it work? You know, what would you try if you had, you know, $50 to go buy new supplies? What would you try if this, if that? It can really help students, one, understand that failure is a part of the scientific process, right? It's an important part. And two, it can help mitigate some of that emotional reaction when they try to do an experiment and it doesn't go the way they want it to. So teaching them that kind of resilience in the face of that is very valuable. Tell me what you're wondering about. Again, it's not a question, but it's really open-ended. It gets those gears turning. Do you understand is not a helpful one. It could be open-ended, but it's very, very vague. So keeping your questions specific and open-ended. Okay, we're going to breeze through some of the rest of this. In fact, we're actually not even going to talk about this. Okay, let's talk about virtual STEM. I think when I looked at the results online, nobody is, okay, a couple people. So we've got a few people who are doing some summer programming either virtually or non-traditionally. Is anyone doing virtual STEM programming? Right, you're not face-to-face, you're doing STEM activities, but it's going to be through a camera or through a screen. A couple people. Okay, so let's talk about this for a second. This is a question that we're getting a lot from all over the state is how do we do STEM online? The answer is we don't know yet. We're still trying to gather that information because this has never been done on that scale before. We have, however, come up with some questions that may help you make some of those plans. The number one question is, what platform are you going to use? Okay, this is a big question and there's a lot of debate and pros and cons about different platforms right now. But in order to decide what you're going to use, you may need to know what kinds of activities you're going to do. Some platforms are more interactive than others. Right? Some of them will let students see your face and your screen at the same time, but some of them won't. So to really decide practically what you want to do, ask yourself, what does the activity need to look like? What information do students have to have access to? How interactive can I make it? How many people are going to access the lesson at the same time, right? The way that you do a lesson with 500 people or 100 people is very different than the way you do it with 5 or 10 or 20. So these are kind of the questions that we've come up with to spark those conversations. We will keep information updated as we gather it, as we come up with like promising practices that we've seen other organizations doing or that there's some research or some data to support. We will be making that available. In the meantime, there's a lot of things that are going to be very fluid and that are going to be really based on just do STEM programming the best you know how to do it and make sure that you're using that engineering process for yourself, right? If you try a STEM activity and it doesn't work at all, it's important to remember as much for yourself as it is for the students that like, okay, testing and improving is a part of the process, right? Figuring out what went wrong and then doing it again differently, that is part of high quality STEM. So we've got about 10 minutes left, and I want to make some resources available. One of the biggest needs that we've identified is that people need more STEM lessons. Things are very chaotic right now, and if anybody has all of their summer program lessons done, congratulations, you're a better person than I am. I wouldn't have gotten that done at this point, so I want to make some things available to you. I'm going to switch my screen here if everyone will be patient for a moment. Okay, can everyone see this website? Any thumbs up, thumbs down? Yes? Okay, great.
It's on the presentation, Julienne.
It's on the presentation still. Okay. Okay. We're just gonna stop sharing and then we're going to fix it. Okay, is that better? No.
Perfect. I
Perfect?
see the website
Yes,
on my
okay.
screen. Yep.
Great. So we have some things that are available for you to just use however you would like. The first one is this lesson library. This is lessons that have been submitted by teachers, things that we have developed, things that we have that have been shared with us from other websites, and we are constantly adding to this. So you are free to use any of these activities in any way that you would like, any format. They are just totally available for you to use. You can search by a keyword, you can sort by different things, you can filter. So if you have a subject that you want, say you're doing astronomy camp, you can just do that. And you're like, okay, I need a lesson that I can do for 10 minutes after lunch. You can just click the length, you can click the grade level, and it will show you what is available. In this instance, we only have one activity that meets all of those requirements. Or if you're like, you know what, I just need a STEM lesson that takes a long time. We actually don't have any on there either, but there will be. So we're always adding to this. Keep coming back, keep taking a look at it. You're welcome to use any of those things. If you are looking for equipment, we do have an equipment library. This is more for people located in the Wasatch region. If you are not located in the Wasatch region, you can contact your local Education Service Center. There are 5 throughout the state of Utah. You can get in touch with your local school district about where yours is, and they have these kits that have Lego Mindstorms, Ozobots, and B-Bots in them. Typically, people are competing with school districts for use of these, but given the circumstances, we are working on making these resources available to as many people as possible. So that's something to keep in mind. If anyone uses Canvas, I don't imagine that you do. If you do, we are putting up some Canvas modules, so you could just take those and integrate them wholesale. If you ever want training or support, you can always reach out to us. If you have a question about, is this a good activity, or, you know, what else can I do, things like that, you can email us, you can reach out on our website, anything like that. We currently also have a STEM in the Home resource page, and this is curated activities and online things. Some of them are online, some of them are not. We go through and sort through activities every single week so that we're only posting what we feel like are the best ones. So you don't have to sort through 100,000 different lessons to like find one that's you think that is high quality for you.